Hi, everyone. Good morning. Welcome to our Hangout on Air about building conversational experiences with actions on Google with Daniel Imri Sitinayake and Wayne Pierkarski. Daniel is a developer advocate at Google, focusing on API.ai. Dan teaches engineers to build conversational experiences using the magic of machine learning. He's worked with conversational UX since 2010. Before landing at Google, Dan co-founded America's first insect farming technology company, Tiny Farms Inc. He's mentored hundreds of software and technology students at Hack Reactor, one of the world's top coding academies, and held a full-time faculty position at Birmingham City University. Dan earned a bachelor's degree at Computer Networks and Security from Birmingham City University, where he graduated with first-class honors. Wayne is a developer advocate at Google, focusing on Internet of Things and the Google Assistant. He has worked for 15 years in academia and industry in the areas of wearable computing, outdoor augmented reality, and mobile devices. He works to get developers excited about new Google technologies through conferences, social media, and training materials. He also works to advocate for developers within Google, ensuring developers have the right tools and information to support their work. Daniel and Wayne, thank you so much for joining us today. And with that, I'll turn it over to both of you.
Yeah, thank you very much. And we're excited to be presenting to you guys today. So what we're going to talk to you about is how to build a conversational experience using actions on Google. So I'm going to go through an introduction of what actions on Google is, and then walk you through some of the tools that we offer that will allow you to build a really compelling experience. So at Google, we believe that the future is AI first, and we've been heavily investing in the areas of machine learning, speech recognition, and language understanding. And these things all come together in the Google Assistant, which basically allows you to have a conversation with Google that helps you get things done. And it's available everywhere from your watch up to your car and many other devices. So because of our investments in AI, the conversation with the assistant can be completely natural. You basically just use your voice and ask for stuff in a natural way, and the assistant helps you. So for a developer, this platform has three parts. So first, there are the devices that support the assistant. So that could be the Google Home or your mobile device or even your Android Auto. And there's then the Google Assistant, which is the conversation between you and Google. And you basically can get things done by talking with the assistant. And there's a bunch of stuff that users can do just by talking to the assistant. But then as a developer, you can use the Actions on Google platform to extend the assistant and add functionality that wasn't possible before. So a developer can implement an assistant app, and that's what we're going to focus on today. So how an assistant app works is fairly simple. So the assistant itself listens out for a user invoking your action. So the user can say a phrase like, "Okay, Google, talk to personal chef." Oops, and that triggered my assistant on my phone. So this will tell Google the name of the action that you want to talk to. And from this point onwards, the user is now talking to your app. So your app will generate dialogue output, which is then spoken back to the user. When the user makes requests, your action processes it and then replies back again. So the user has a two-way dialogue with your app until the conversation is finished. So I'm going to show you a quick demo of a simple app that we've developed called Personal Chef. So give us a moment to get that sound sorted out.
Sure, here's Personal Chef.
Why is there feedback? Because we're getting feedback from my mic and your laptop. I just told her. Sorry, we can't play the video through the Hangout. No. Yeah, I'll narrate over it. It's my video. So anyway,
all right, yeah, so sorry, we had
so play the video again and we'll show it. All right, so this is a video I recorded a while back when we launched Actions on Google. So we'll play the video and then I'll talk over it. It says, hi, okay, Google, talk to personal chef. And it says, hi, I'm your personal chef. What would you like? And then I say, well, it's kind of cold outside, so I'm looking for some chicken and a hot soup and something that'll warm me up. It's cold outside. And it says, okay, and what kind of protein, what kind of vegetable would you like? And it says, oh, I've got some canned tomatoes. And it's like, oh, okay, here's a recipe I found you from example.com for a chicken soup recipe. Sounds good.
Nice job, Wayne. Awesome. So what we saw from that conversation other than it's cold outside or I'd like something to warm me up. So if you think as an engineer about trying to write a regular expression or a parser to try and extract meaning out of this, it's going to basically be impossible. There's so many difficult cases and edge cases that it's pretty much impossible to for anything that isn't trivial. Is my mic on?
It's working.
Okay, it's working. So let's go through some of the ways we could build this interaction. So one of the ways is to use Conversation API and the Actions SDK. So this is kind of the close to the metal way of doing this. You're going to basically interface directly with the Conversation API. Your app will receive a request containing the raw spoken text from the user as a string, and Google will handle the speech recognition for you. But you have to pass the strings and generate a response, which Google will then speak back to the user. The problem is this obviously means you have to do all of the heavy lifting of interpreting the natural language yourself, which can be extremely challenging. So fortunately, we have a bunch of tools available that can make this easier. And our core tool for doing this is API.ai. And it makes handling this kind of thing really easy. So today we're going to give you an overview of API.ai, what it is, and this is generally what you're going to be using if you're building an app on the Assistant. So API.ai basically provides an intuitive graphical user interface to create conversational interfaces. So you put in examples of things that a user might say to express a certain desire. And then you can also specify the values that you'd like to get from the user, like any specific detailed information. And the system uses machine learning to understand the sentences and manage the conversation. So the key part here is that you no longer need to process the raw strings that are coming from the Assistant. API.ai does this for you and returns structured data. So we can see here where it fits into the stack. So it fits in after the Assistant, and it handles the fulfillment for the Assistant. So when the Assistant returns a string of text, that will be handled by API.ai. And as a developer, it is converted into some structured data that you can work with to make things happen on your back end. So another way of looking at this is in this loop. So once the user starts talking to the Assistant app, they're going to say something like, find me a recipe for homemade cannoli. The Google Assistant then translates that speech into text for you. That text then gets sent to API.ai, which will take care of the hard work of digesting it and returning some structured data to your webhook, which is a piece of code that you write, which will interpret that structured data and generate a response based on, in this case, looking something up in the database. Once that response has been generated, it will be handed back to the Assistant, which will read it out to the user. So I'm going to give you a quick demo of the API.ai user interface. So give me a moment to switch over my screen. All right, so what we see here is the main interface for API.ai, and I've actually loaded in the agent, the personal chef agent that we just saw a demo of. So what I'm going to do is walk you through the interface and then add some functionality. So in API.ai, we create an intent to represent each thing the user might want to do. So in this case, we've built an intent that covers the user asking for a recipe, which is this recipe recommendation intent here. So now that I've loaded that up, you can see how we've actually provided examples of different ways the user might express their desire for a recipe. So we've got chicken sounds good to me. I'd like a cold dessert and I want it right now. So these examples are used to train a machine learning model that can recognize what the user wants. And as we add examples, API.ai will automatically pick out important concepts that are mentioned by the user. So what I'm going to do here to show off how we do this is add a couple of additional examples. So I'm going to add, I want a quick starter. All right, and so what the system has actually done here is recognized some of the words within this example that I've given are mapped to entities that the system has been trained about. So the system actually knows that quick refers to a cooking speed and starter refers to a dish type. And it's able to automatically pick those concepts out and provide them as parameters for us to use later on. So I'll show that again. So I'll say, do you have any ideas for chicken salad? In this case, we picked out chicken as a protein option and salad as a dish type. And these are options based on examples that we've entered in another part of the interface. So we can also mark these items as required. So if we go down to our parameters here, you can see that some items are marked as required, which means that if the user doesn't tell us that item when they invoke the intent, they'll automatically be prompted for it, even if they didn't mention it. So what I'm going to do is save now, and I'm going to show you how we can try out this agent. So I'm going to tell the agent in our test console in the corner here, I want something with beef. All right, and so what we can see here in the response is that the correct intent was matched, so the recipe recommendation intent was matched, but because we have vegetable marked as required, and I didn't mention a vegetable, I just mentioned beef, the system is prompting us to ask what kind of vegetables do you have. So in this case, I can say potato, and we still need a dish type. So the system is asking, what kind of dish would you prefer? So let's say main course. And so the system's able to generate a response based on that. And in this case, it's just hard coded, but in reality, we could go away to our database and look something up. So it's pretty amazing to be able to conduct a conversation dynamically on the fly without knowing ahead of time what the user will say. And then once we're done, it's only a few clicks to integrate the app with a load of different platforms. So if we go to integrations here, we can see all the available integrations that API.ai has, but we want to integrate with Actions on Google. So we can just click here, and then we can load up the Actions on Google simulator to test this out. So this tool allows us to try out our action in a way that's very close to how it would work on either a mobile phone or on the Google Home device, or on another surface supported by the Google Assistant. So I can try out, I want something with beef. And this is going to connect to my API.ai agent, which will generate a response and return it. Oh. Let me refresh the page. Oh yeah, so I've got to say, talk to my test app first. All right, so it's greeting me as my personal chef. And then I can say, I want something with beef. Cool, so we're back in the same conversation that we just defined in API.ai. So this is the workflow for building an action. And as you can see, it's super fast and simple. So it's pretty easy to get started doing this stuff. So I'm going to go back to the slide presentation. So give me 1 minute. All right, so now that we've seen a demo of how the interface works and how we can actually start building an app, I'm going to talk a little bit about how we can go beyond just the bare bones text and actually build something that's a really compelling experience for users. So the first port of call when you're thinking about building an app should be our design resources. So we provide a whole load of information about how you can design an app that is a joy for your users to interact with. And we have everything from written materials through to a quick reference poster that I definitely recommend checking out. So once you've thought about the design of your app, we can think about the different platforms we have available. So we support different surfaces that have different capabilities. So we have everything from simple audio outputs on the Google Home or the mobile handset, or on the mobile device, because we have a screen, we can craft special responses that make most of the device's capabilities. So at the most basic, you can specify on-screen display text that's distinct from the spoken response. So this could be useful to provide an at-a-glance summary of what was said, or to include text-only characters like emoji. That said, you should never include information in the text that isn't spoken out loud. So to guide the user in responding, you can provide suggestion chips, and these supply suggested answers to a question that can be chosen with a single tap. The user's still free to respond with freeform text. So a use case here might be suggesting common vegetables that could appear in a recipe. Basic cards allow us to display substantial on-screen information in the form of images, text, and a hyperlink. And the text doesn't have to be spoken out loud. So a use case for this might be showing a nice big photo of a dish along with a link to the full recipe. And you can see in the code example here that this is just a matter of using our library, making a few simple calls that define what this element ends up looking like. You can also use lists and carousels to provide a visual selection mechanism for users. So a carousel shows images, titles, and descriptions for a small number of options. And a list has capacity for substantially more, but the images are a lot smaller. So a carousel might be useful for showing a couple of different options for types of chicken salad. And a list use case could be for showing a dozen different dishes that feature chicken as an ingredient. So you might have a conversation that needs to know the user's name or location. So here's one example, which is finding a local bookstore. You want to know the zip code of the user. So you can use our SDK to request permissions for the name, their course location, or their precise location. And when you invoke this function, the assistant will ask the user for permission using the voice of your app. So it's very seamless. The name is whoever is registered to the device. The precise location is the exact GPS coordinates and street address of where the user is. And the course location is just the zip code and the city. So if the user invokes your actions that require a sign-in, so if you're integrating with your own backend server and you have an OAuth server, the Google Assistant can prompt users to link their account. So you can actually link the user's Google account with your own account and look up information or have them create transactions on your server or whatever kind of deeper integration you want to do. So at this point, the user will receive a card at the top of the Google Home app on their phone that provides a link to your login page. And once the user has completed the account linking flow on your web app, they can invoke your action, and your action can then authenticate calls to your services by obtaining a token. So the key thing to remember is that you need to provide the OAuth endpoint. So this is going to involve integrating an OAuth server on your side. So if your experience involves shopping or payments, we support rich transactions. We allow you to accept user payments. So the really cool part is that customers can use whatever payment information they have on file with Google, so payments can be super easy. There's no need to fumble around with a credit card or read numbers out loud, but you're free to use your own payment solution if you have that integrated with your platform. Transactions supports a shopping cart, delivery options, an order summary screen, and payments. And the user can also see a history of all of their transactions. So the Google Assistant also supports home automation via our smart home integration. So device makers can easily integrate their existing devices with our home graph. And the home graph basically knows the state of all connected devices. So when you ask to dim the lights a little bit, it knows how to do that intelligently. So as a user, you can make all kinds of requests. So you could say, make it warmer. You could say, turn off all the lights, or ask how many lights are on. There's endless possibilities, and we plan on adding many different device types very soon. And we've also announced the Google Assistant SDK, which enables you to embed the Google Assistant into your own custom hardware projects. So recently, Magpie magazine announced the AIY project kit from Google, which provides a cardboard housing with a button, a speaker, and a microphone to wrap around a Raspberry Pi that uses the Google Assistant SDK. And at Google I/O, we demoed a mocktail mixer from our partner Deep Local, which embeds the Google Assistant SDK as well. So you can walk up to the device and tell it the kind of drink you want it to mix up for you, and it will give you one. So you can embed the Google Assistant into pretty much anything. So a really important part of building an app is getting it discovered, and we provide several different mechanisms you can use to reach users. The basic way to access your app is by invoking its name. And when you submit your app, you can provide a set of trigger phrases that the assistant will recognize as a request to speak to your app. And you can also support deep links, so users can ask your app for a specific thing that is supported. In the long term, users are going to be able to find your app based on its specific capabilities. So if they ask to play a game, the assistant will offer them a few options from the assistant apps available. We also have a directory where users can explore the apps that are on offer, and users don't have to install or pay for anything. All of the apps are available just by asking. And finally, you can hyperlink to your app from just about anywhere. So you could share it in social media, promote it through your own site or apps, and encourage press to drive traffic to your assistant app. And if the user clicks on the link, they'll be taken to a screen on their phone where they can read about your app and try it out. So we've looked at how to build a conversational experience using API.ai, and we've learned about how to design an experience that makes the most of the platforms available. So let's talk a little bit about how we get started. Fortunately, we've got a number of resources that are designed to help you get going. So we have a series of videos that cover a lot of what you saw today and more. So we've got an intro video that explains our high-level concepts and goes over the personal chef example. There's a video dedicated to conversation design from Nandini, which is really important to look at as you start building. And Sachit has produced a screencast of every step needed to build our personal chef example. We also have several code labs that will guide you through the experience of designing and implementing your first assistant app. So if you learn in an interactive way, I definitely recommend checking these out and working through them. And finally, when you want to discuss this stuff with other developers, we have an active Actions on Google developer community on Google+. So we post regularly there to keep you up to date with the latest news, and we also answer questions from developers. It's also worth checking out our documentation, which is awesome, and our Twitter. And then if you have questions as you're going along, you're also welcome to post those on Stack Overflow, which we monitor and regularly respond to. So thanks everyone for listening to my presentation, and I would like to open it up to questions.
Great, thanks so much, Daniel and Wayne. We have a couple of questions in the YouTube video link and in the form we shared out. One question is how to build a chatbot when conversation is not properly defined using API.ai.
When it's not properly defined. So I guess, what does that mean? It's like super freeform, or like, do we have any more information on the question?
Expand on your question in the chat section, that would be great. So while we're waiting for him to do that, I have another question. Do we have to create these parameters to fit our context, or is it smart enough to say if we are in the context of game development, it will create a game genre difficulty levels as parameters?
So that's a really good question. So there are actually two types of these parameters, which the technical term is entities within API.ai. We have system entities, which are predefined or pre-learned entities that we know about. And there are a few dozen categories. So it's everything from places to names and dates and times and all the stuff that's really unpleasant to extract using a regex. We support a whole load of different functionality through that route. But for things that are specific to your domain, you can create developer entities, and developer entities are defined by you. You can either define them in the user interface of API.ai, or you can define them programmatically. So we expose an API that you can use to submit entities in bulk. So for example, if you have a backend that already maintains a list of, or you have a database field that has a bunch of these type of terms that you would like to be able to understand within API.ai, you can just upload those in bulk through our API.
Okay, cool. I have another question for you. Building bots and conversational UI is new to our team. What are the recommended skill sets that we will need to design conversations, add intents to API.ai, and train bots when we find errors?
Well, I mean, it's good to watch all those videos that we showed. So at the end of the talk, Dan showed those 3 videos that are on our main documentation page. So they're a really good start to sort of learn more about the concepts. UX, like voice UI design, is also kind of a new thing as well. And Nandini's video goes through a lot of that too. And she's actually got a new series coming out that's going to have even more information. So she wants to, educate developers more, because most developers, even myself, we've been programming for a long time, but we're not experts in voice UI, which is something a bit different. At the same time, though, I mean, we're all humans who know how to speak, and so a lot of it comes down to just sort of learning the things that work for you. So one great way to get started is you actually get 2 people in a room, and one person pretends to be the bot and the other person pretends to be the user, and you just have a practice conversation, write it all down, and then maybe test it with a few other people. And that's a great way of capturing sort of what conversations could possibly look like. Mm-hmm. And then that could help you to structure the intents and so forth in API later on. So it's something that you have to play with to get familiar with it. But yeah, definitely watch the videos. And then we have a bunch of good guidance on our developer site with more information of step-by-step things about understanding how to do a voice UX and create a persona. We didn't have much time to talk about it today, but a persona is where you build a story around a character, like a person, like a real person in real life that has personality and quirky things about them, and you can put that as part of the conversation to make it more fun and engaging for people so that they feel like it's a real human and not just a robot.
Excellent, thank you. Peter would like to know when you will add support for other languages like Czech.
Oh, okay, so yeah, we've currently rolled out Actions on Google in a couple different countries. We've currently rolled the Google Assistant out in a few countries, but Actions on Google is sort of separate from that. So just recently we rolled out Actions on Google in the UK. So that happened about a month ago. And so that's available right now. And then other languages are coming soon, but I don't have an exact timeline on that. We can't make any promises as to what the exact dates would be. But generally, Actions on Google is always going to follow the Google Assistant support. So one follows the other, but I can't give any dates on that. I don't know myself.
Okay. Actually, another similar question. I think it'll be the same answer if the conversation API is supported in Brazilian Portuguese.
Yeah, so it's the same problem. I said, you need the Google Assistant to be supported first, which I don't think it's supported in Brazilian Portuguese right now. And then the next step is you need the actions on Google platform to be available for that particular language. So generally one follows the other, but yeah, they're working on it, and I'm going to be making a video about internationalization and how to go about doing it. It actually poses a few interesting challenges because API has multi-language support, and then you've got to, on the JavaScript webhook side, you've got to deal with the multiple languages there. And because conversations can unfold differently in different languages, you've got to have to like redo the conversation differently because different languages have different way of answering questions and going back and forth with the users. So we'll have more information about that coming soon.
Cool. Now the question, what is the limit of conversation hierarchy?
There's no such, so we have like intents. So you say a phrase and then that sort of goes to one of the intents that are available. And then the intent has a back and forth where you can resolve entities that might be missing. But it's not like a tree structure as such. But there's a limit to the number of intents, but I'm not sure what that number is.
Yeah, it's in the thousands, so it's something that you're unlikely to run into, especially for an Actions on Google app where you're not going to probably want to have immense complexity. But the kind of fundamental limits of the platform are pretty large. So rather than hierarchy, as Wayne mentioned, there's more of a kind of a flat structure naturally within API.ai and the way intents are matched. But then we have this really powerful tool called the context. And a context is something that an intent can apply to the conversation. So when a certain intent is matched, you can apply a certain context. And other intents will only be matched if certain contexts are in place. So you can kind of build a hierarchical structure if you want, but you can also have a more organic kind of web of dependencies. And there isn't really any limitation to the scope of that.
Another viewer wants to know, does this setup with Google Assistant plus API.ai remember user context? Example, user A had a conversation with my app yesterday. If user A accesses my app today, do I have any context information to remember said user options?
Yeah, so if you look at some of our samples, when the Google Assistant connects to your Assistant app, it has a token that it presents each time that it comes to your app. So you have the ability to store information in that. Like you could use that token to key it into a Firebase database, for example, and one of the samples does that. So we use that so that when you run the Assistant app for the first time, it says, hi, I'm this Assistant app and I can do all kinds of interesting things. And then once it's said that spiel, it then records a flag in a database based on this token so that it doesn't do it again. And so so Google Assistant doesn't store a whole bunch of information for you. It just gives you an ID that says, here is a unique ID number that you could store data yourself with. And that can be used to preserve information from the conversation. So if on day one you say, my favorite color is blue, on the second day, you could ask it, what's my favorite color? And it would know that because your Assistant app stored that data based on this token.
I have a bunch of questions from the same user, so I'll read them out. Are we the sole owners of the intents that we create, or are they shared with other customers or with Google?
The intents that you put in API are only within your Assistant app.
Okay.
So like in the personal chef example, if someone says, I really want a meal with chicken, that would never be available anywhere else except within. You would have to start the conversation with talk to personal chef, and then those intents would be available. So yeah, it would be terrible if the intents would be cross-wired somehow between different apps, because then everything would get very confusing.
And then is it possible to export, import intents?
Yeah, absolutely. So API.ai allows you to export everything that you've built just in a simple to understand JSON format. And you can actually programmatically interact with this data via an API as well. So you can not only export, but you can make modifications to that on your own and then upload again. So yeah, absolutely.
Okay, and then a viewer wants to know how to handle a situation where the assistant needs to talk to two people simultaneously.
Two people simultaneously. So I'm not sure what that would mean. I mean, generally the assistant always works with a person like me going up to the Google Assistant saying, talk to Google Assistant, talk to personal chef or something. If there's two people like me and Dan both in the room, and if I was, so we have a speaker, we have the ability to identify the speaker. So it's possible for two different people to use the same Google Home device. Maybe this is what they're asking about. So if I say, okay, Google, talk to personal chef, the Google Home will be like, aha, that's Wayne doing the talking. So it will present Wayne's token to the personal chef app. Now, if Dan then says, I want chicken, it'll use me as the identifier. So whoever says the hot word, okay, Google, that's the ID that will be used for the rest of that session. And so that's the way it works. So it's not possible for Dan and me to go back and forth and somehow it separate Dan out and me out while we're chatting to it.
Okay. The user wants to know, is there any way to build the Google Assistant without using API.ai?
Yes. So there's a conversation API where you can basically just get raw strings. So it'll just show you the string that was spoken and you reply back with a string that you want to speak back. And so that's the simplest way to do it from a sort of looking at the code perspective. But it's complicated because processing natural language is really complicated. And so as Dan mentioned, one of the things that API brings to the table is that it helps you parse in those strings. Because if you had to do that personal chef example, there's one part where I say, hey, it's cold outside, so I'm looking for something to warm me up, like a hot soup. Now, if you had a regex that's searching for the words hot, cold, warm, whatever, all three of them are in the same sentence, but only one of them was the correct answer. And so API was able to extract that out, but I have no idea how to write a regex to solve that problem. So yes, you don't have to use API, but for most people, I definitely recommend it. It really makes your life like a million times easier. And for most people, you want to focus on the conversation. But yeah, you can do the conversation API manually if you really want to.
It's also worth noting that API AI is completely free. So from a kind of economic perspective, there's no reason not to at least give it a try.
Okay. And then the same user wants to know, can I have a customized response for a specific user?
Well, if you've already talked to the user before, then you've got the token. So you can customize it that way. Or you could randomly generate a response if you wanted to. It doesn't have to be the same every time. But you don't get all of the user's personal information. You have to request permission for it first. So if you want their location or something, the Google Home will say, hey, would you mind if I give your location details to this Assistant app? But yeah, so you can personalize it, but you have to have the information to personalize it based on something.
Okay, cool. I think we want
sorry.
Sorry.
It might be worth noting there that if you have information about the user on your own backend, we do support account linking via OAuth. So you will build an OAuth server that will allow you to identify the user across both platforms. And at that point, you'll have all the information that you have in your own backend about the user, and you can personalize to your heart's content.
For one last question, is it possible to forward context or some mechanism that we can use to let the system know things without having to submit an action? Example, provide a user's name so the bot can greet the user.
So I think, again, that would be coming back to these two mechanisms we have for learning about who the user is. And so on the one side, we have the ability to ask the user permission to get their name or their location. So you could use that to basically have the assistant ask the user if it's okay if you as a developer can have their real name. On the other side, you can support account linking with OAuth. So in this case, you're going to, I'm assuming you would have the user's name on your own backend, and the user is able to sign in, link the accounts, and you will then have access to that information. And you can then persist that information between sessions.
And someone wants to know, is API.ai free in an enterprise context? Are there any limits for number of intents, calls, commercial restrictions, etc.?
So no, the way things work right now is everything is free, and if you think you're going to be running into really high queries per second, you can reach out to us and we'll make sure that we make that work for you.
Cool. Excellent. Yeah, I think we have no more questions. So last call, everyone. If you want to ask Wayne and Daniel any more questions. And all right, I think we're good. Thank you all so much.
Yeah, thank you very much.
It was fun. Thanks a lot. See you later.
See you later. Bye-bye.